Hi, and welcome to a video about a piece of software that claims to make your experience of using Windows 95 an altogether faster and slicker experience. I've picked up all sorts of bits and pieces software-wise over the years, and not all of them are particularly interesting, but they all have their place in history, in retro history, and some of them are quite innovative, trying to do crazy stuff back in the day. So I've decided, in between my larger projects, going to take a look at some of this stuff, beginning today with this Dashboard 95 from Starfish Software. Starfish are quite an interesting company with an interesting history. It all begins with Borland Software.
In life, to succeed, one needs to adapt quickly to change in one's environment. Borland Software, for a rapid response to change.
Borland were a big beast back in the days, a company that started in the 80s and competed with Microsoft in many areas into the 90s. Their development environments, things like C++, their implementation of that actually outsold Microsoft for quite a while. They bought in DBase, so they had a fairly big database to compete with Microsoft offerings at the time as well. And they even tried to go head-to-head with Microsoft Office by building an Office suite around some of their own products and a partnership with WordPerfect. So they had a lot of big things going on, but they also had a lot of kind of smaller software. One of those things was a thing called Sidekick, which was a PIM, a personal information manager. They were quite popular back in the day as an electronic way of keeping your contacts, your relationships with your customer and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, all taken over by mobile phones and things like that now. But for a small businessman, it was just a handy thing to have, and Sidekick was one of those. And it was this smaller program, Sidekick, this personal information manager, that started things for Starfish. So at this time in early 95, the guy in charge of Borland, the chief executive, the CEO, and also a founding father of the company, a guy called, I think it's pronounced Felipe, it might be Philippe, I'm not sure, but we'll call him Felipe from now on. Felipe Khan decided he wanted to move on. So Borland was losing money on Sidekick, and he asked them if he could take that with him to form a new software company, and they said yes. There was also another product called Dashboard that Borland had acquired from Hewlett-Packard a year earlier, and he asked if he could take that also, and they also said yes. So with these two products, Felipe Khan went on to form Starfish, the new software company, in March 1995. And so that brings us to what today's video is all about. At last we get here. So it's about Dashboard 95, which I acquired in a pile of stuff a while back. So Philippe Khan liked to term the new software that he was designing for the yet unreleased Windows 95, it might be said. So Starfish immediately started producing stuff for Windows 95 because that was on the horizon, due out a few months later. And he had this concept of going for the consumer instead of for big business like Borland had, and he termed his software Slimware, in opposition to bloatware, because it was designed to make life easier rather than harder by adding loads of useless crap to your desktop and all that kind of thing. So yeah, we're going to be looking at Dashboard, and we're going to be trying it out on Windows 95 and seeing if it does indeed make things easier to do. So I got a bunch of software where I got the discs and the manuals but no boxes, so this is one. It's nice to have the manual. While I was looking at this, I thought it was in my head that I had some other software that was related to this, so I scuttled off and had to dig through my pile, and sure enough I did. I found I had another copy of Dashboard, and it is the version of Dashboard made by Hewlett-Packard. So this is what Borland actually bought that Felipe Khan then took on to form Starfish with. So this is even pre-Borland, and I believe this sealed, eco-sealed they call it, in a plastic bag instead of a box. They didn't know at the time that plastic was going to be way worse than paper. They were more concerned about trees than clogging up oceans back in those days. But yeah, haven't opened this yet. This is going to be for Windows 3.11, I imagine, so we'll probably take a look at that at some other time. Anyway, class dismissed. The history lesson is over. It's time to get this installed, and let's take a look and see if it really does speed up Windows 95. It's a very small program, so it only came on a single floppy disk. It's got quite a substantial manual, and I was expecting this to be a multi-language manual, the one that I flicked through a bit earlier in the video. But no, it's all a single language, so there's quite a lot of stuff in there. A lot of it that I'm not going to touch on today. There's a lot of printer integration and things like that going on, which I don't have a printer attached to the machine. We're going to be using my Pentium 2 300 to install this thing on, just because it's a machine that has Windows 95 already installed, and it's also out on my table at the minute because the next video I do is probably going to be upping that. It's got a Voodoo 2 in it at the minute, and I was lucky enough to come across a second Voodoo 2. It's not quite a matching card, but I believe it can be done, so there's going to be some SLI fun with this machine probably in the next video. So yeah, look at that. That's a pretty yellow installer if ever I saw one. We'll just let that whiz through, and then I guess we'll just have to reboot and see what we've got. And when we come back in, as it says in the manual, if we go to the start button, it should have included something new. Yep, there it is. So we've got a starfish thing docked at the top there, so it's nice and handy. So let's click, and look at that. Look at that. I can see why they call it dashboard. It looks just like a car, which I think is the general idea, which is why it's called dashboard in the first place. So it's designed to sort of resemble the instrumentation on a car, which is the reason why I called my title Making Windows 95 into a Porsche. In fact, Starfish pushed that notion of it becoming a car to, even in the user guide, it calls itself driver training when you're actually going through the different pages. So I can already see I like the look of this. As soon as I look at it, I can see loads of stuff that I can think that would be useful just to have in front of you. So they've pulled out the program groups from Windows across the top and put them into different tabs, and then you can pull the menus out of those and launch stuff, which I think is pretty cool. Also, if you've upgraded from Windows 3.1, which kind of shows the heritage of this with Windows 95 not out yet, you can carry forward some of the stuff from Windows 3.1, some of the groups and things that you've got on there as well will become tabs on here. So across the top you've got all of these program group tabs. I can see the ones for the games that I've installed and stuff like that, and you can just pull them up and see the menus within there, the options within each group, and launch stuff. So I think that's pretty cool straight off. And what's not to love about a program that makes launching Doom even easier than it already is? So there's a few little icons on the left hand side at the bottom below those program groups, and it appears that they allow you to split things off. So when you click on those, it just shoots things off to the side, and you can have various lists docked in different places, and then you can kind of hide the main dashboard if you want to, and just have your programs hovering there. So all of this might seem a bit stupid in retrospect, but you have to remember that this came out right at the beginning of Windows 95. Now, Windows 95 was quite a culture shock for those who weren't around for it. Windows 3 was around, but most people were probably still using DOS, especially like people who were playing games and stuff like that. So it was quite a jump to this interface, and it was probably, there was definitely a market for some hand holding. But to be honest, this actually feels a lot cleaner and a lot nicer to use than delving into all the menus and things, which even now are a pain in the ass, but back then they would have been completely unfamiliar. So it's kind of nice to see everything sitting obviously accessible in front of you. So I've already seen we've got a row of tabs across the top of the dashboard for program groups, but across the bottom we've got just like links to panels of grouped things. So for example, the first one's documents, and if you click on documents, it essentially trawls through your hard drive and looks for any and all documents that it can find, and it's not very intuitive because a lot of documents are just named help.txt and readme.txt, but it finds them all, but you don't know where they've come from. So you can quite often end up with a lot of text files that are readmes, for example. You don't know which one's which until you click on it to open it. So I had some dead links as well where it still thought things were there, so I guess registry entries were still there, but the actual things themselves weren't. But yeah, the documents tab on this is pretty useless, I think, so it's a bit clunky and I don't like it. But the other ones are pretty straightforward. So if you click on the multimedia tab, you get all of your your sound recorder and movie players and all that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say this bit's particularly useful, given that you can probably find a lot of this stuff in some of the program groups anyway. So yeah, but it's pretty self-explanatory, apart from the documents one I found a bit confusing, but you can still launch stuff from it, so I guess it could be useful to some people as long as they know what's what, and maybe you do a bit of... There is one thing about this, I would go so far as to say it's even buggy, is when you launch things and then minimize them, and it's resizing this dashboard all the time. So if you kind of undock something and then redock it, it resizes the dashboard, which is intensely annoying. So I don't know whether it was designed for a specific resolution, but I'm just an 800 by 600 here, and yeah, that's a bit clunky. It doesn't seem to like to sit in one place, and if you perform an action and then when you go back to the dashboard, it's quite often jumped around or it's expanded itself or that kind of thing. So I would say that's one thing I don't like about it. So then we've got a little row of icons down the middle. There are 4 of them, and you can customize these, but they're for Windows tools. So here we've got things like the file manager and control panel and quick links to those. Click on the button, up they come, things like find. You can amend this to various things like network neighborhood and explorer, and you can just pick 4 that you think will be the most useful to you. So there's a clock icon in the middle next to a calendar icon, and I guess they're part of kind of the same thing. In the clock, if you double click on it, it comes up and it offers you the chance to set an alert, and you can also tell it to launch a program. So that's quite cool. So if you want to do some fragging in Doom, it's midnight, you can come in here and set it all up, and then you can fall asleep on your chair, and at midnight it will ping you with a sound to wake you up, and when you open your eyes it'll all be sitting there waiting for you to go and blast people with your shotgun. The calendar again does the same thing, it just launches the same thing. There are some of these things which look like they're separate processors to launch, but really they look like they're in separate boxes, like the clock and the calendar, but when you launch or double click on each one, it launches the same dialog for you to set stuff. There are also a range of different sounds in here, so you can wake yourself up with different noises, and they're WAV files, so you could put anything in here. I guess you could be creative and put some of your own WAVs in here to prompt you for things. Ah, the things that used to amuse us back in 1995. So next there's a couple of icons here for document arrangement. So again, at the click of a button you can stack stuff, You can display them side by side. You can cascade them. So I've got a couple of blank Word documents here to demonstrate, but really the issue here is that everything happens behind your dashboard, so your dashboard kind of interferes, and you can set your dashboard to be always on top, which I have it set to at the minute, which is probably the wrong thing to do. So really you tile your things as you would like them, and then you minimize your dashboard and do whatever you need to do to those things. But I would like it so that the dashboard's included in the stack, so you can keep the dashboard there, and then you can just mess with your docs below it and then rearrange them or close them when you're finished, because there is an option in the dashboard to just say close everything that's open as well. And then we've got some system information. So this is quite nice as well. So you can see a memory usage, and you've got things like you can tell how full your hard drives are, and this kind of stuff, how much CPU is being used. So that's quite a nice little thing to have, especially if you're doing intensive stuff. If you're doing video editing or something like that, it would be probably handy to know that, because even on this video editor that I'm using right now, quite often it's not the best or most expensive piece of software in the world, and it has some leaky memory going on somewhere, a bit of a memory leak somewhere, and it does freeze up sometimes, and you have to wait a while till it sorts itself out. But yeah, no, this is a nice little thing to have. And one of the nice things about it is you can set alerts on this as well, using those same cheesy sounds that we've just listened to. So you can actually set it to warn you when you're running out of disk space, or you put too much stuff somewhere, or your CPU usage goes over a certain threshold and that kind of thing. So it's a nice thing to have, and I can imagine that it would be useful to some people. And there's also this concept of layouts, which is quite nice in its own little way. So basically what happens is, if you were working in a certain job and you wanted your personal information manager and your modem software to pop up with your telephone headset attached to it and all that kind of thing, you can actually set dashboard to launch things called layouts, and you can create multiples of these, and then you can set one of them to be the default one, and when you turn dashboard on, up pop several programs that you might use often. So I think that's quite a cute little feature as well. It's a highly configurable thing as well, the dashboard. When I was complaining about, say, the Documents tab earlier, and you didn't know what half those icons were, you can actually go through and right click and delete all of those items. Then when you can find things from the menus, and you can drop them in and create your own icons, and if you did it that way and you spent a bit of time configuring it, I think those sort of big icons in the center there that run off the bottom tabs would be quite useful. This is where you do it. This is the configuration window. There's also a games section in here, which I haven't really looked at. There's some, it has to be said, they're quite fixated with gambling in this program. There's a little game that replicates a fruit machine, and there's a little game that replicates a poker game, and there's also a little puzzle game as well, but they're so tiny because you cannot maximize this dashboard any bigger than it really is. There's color swapping you can do, and yeah, that's pretty funky. You can do it from the Windows palette or set your own, I think. So yeah, you can make it look disgusting in purple like this. So it's a fairly configurable thing, and to be honest, I like it. I've got to say, I like having all of this stuff just in front of me, and I can imagine that there would have been a window at the beginning of Windows 95 when people weren't familiar with this interface that we essentially still use today, but back then it was, what do they call it, a paradigm shift between your DOS and your Windows 3 to a very described way of working, which we still. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. I like this. That has to be said. I had a lot of fun messing about with this, and I can actually see that it does make things more intuitive in a sort of Windows 95, 98 environment. I don't know if this would work in 98 as it was specifically designed for 95. Possibly Starfish came out with the Windows 98 version a bit later, but yeah, I enjoyed playing around with it, and I'm going to leave it on the machine and continue to play around with it, maybe try some of the functionality that I didn't get to mess around with, like the printer options and things like that. But yeah, and I said it was going to be a short video, and I waffled on so much it's been pretty much the same length as usual. So there you go, a bit different to the usual messing about with PCs and building machines and stuff like that. A bit of a tedious history lesson about Borland, which was kind of where all this came from, and discovered a related piece of software that I haven't looked at yet as well. So all of that's cool. So I hope you enjoyed watching this little delve into software, a little bit different to the usual videos. Probably be doing a bit more of this as well, because I do have a big old stack of some quite curious stuff, so it'll be quite interesting to look at that in between doing hardware things. Got a few interesting hardware things coming up. Like I said, I'm going to be doing some SLI stuff probably in the next video. I was going to do a stacker video, because I also got some stacker discs when I got all of this software, but I'm having a bit of trouble making that work at the minute, so hopefully get around to that at some point as well. Also, just took delivery of a rather nice Olivetti 286 today, a birthday present from my family, so I'm looking